the Market Musings podcast. Well, hello and welcome to the Market Musings podcast here from StockBox, where today we're going to be talking to someone who we haven't spoken to before, someone as well who I only came to know recently, really, with his new role at Tertiary Minerals. Of course, it's Richard Belcher, the Managing Director of Tertiary Minerals. So very pleased to be talking to Richard, and Dan Flynn is also co-hosting the podcast today. So welcome on. Richard, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you. Sun shining up in Manchester, so all is good with the world at the moment.
Well, indeed, it is. Yeah, the sun is also
Well, I
shining
suppose
here in The
yeah,
Hague.
weather-wise,
Uh,
yes, but there's
yeah, weather.
not
It's
necessarily
nice,
everything
isn't it?
else.
It's very nice.
It
Yeah.
is.
Well, Dan, where are you? I presume you're in the UK, so presumably it's sunny for you as well.
Yeah, down in Surrey, it's also very warm. Yeah, it's all good. Like Richard says,
Hopefully,
the weather's good. I'm not sure about the markets and everything. Although it's been a more positive start to the week, hasn't it, than we've seen for a little while.
yeah, I would generally say it's been a bit more optimism. I think now the China tariffs have been dropped, haven't they? So that will hopefully
Yeah.
stimulate some more interest. Maybe we are, of course, in May. Traditionally, you sell in May, don't you? And stay away until the autumn. So, but we'll see. Obviously, we'll see what happens. But it's nice weather anyway, which is obviously very nice. We're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about Richard, to learn really about Richard, where you've come from, and your past career, things that you've done in your past, and what's led you to the role here at Tertiary. So, I mean, perhaps just first of all, Richard, it'd be quite nice to know just a bit about your early background. You can go back as far as you like, but I think most people tend to sort of say where they grew up and then where they went to university, and also how you came into geology, and how that all came about. So yeah, I mean, maybe for the first few minutes, just give us a bit of a potted history of yourself to sort of start us off.
Yeah, certainly. More than happy to. Well, I suppose like most geologists, I enjoyed the outdoors growing up, and
Mm,
particularly camping and hiking. And growing up in Manchester, I had the Peak District on my doorstep. So spent many weekends with my father, sort of hiking, and sort of grew
mm,
an interest in the natural environment and the world around me from that. As many geologists as well, I collected rocks and fossils growing up, and got more
okay.
of an interest in geology that way. And it was really on those walks, and particularly, I think probably one of the catalysts was visiting the sort of famous Blue John mines we have up in the Derbyshire, the Peaks, the sort of specific type of fluorite. Going down those old mines and seeing the workings,
Mm,
and seeing fossils on the walls where Manchester, uh, many million years ago, back in the Carboniferous, was close to the equator and was subtropical. And I think on that sort of cold, rainy day of walking, and that juxtaposition of much better conditions a long time ago, sort of really sort of grew a seed of interest of how did that happen, and that sort of led on to an
mm,
interest in plate tectonics and geology in general. And growing up, my parents were always sort of keen on me to do something, to have a job that I'm interested in. And luckily, in the 90s, we were able to go to university, and there's no real tuition fees, and there was a lot more
mm.
support to go to university. And I was able to go to university and study geology, and that's sort of where it all began, really.
So, what university did you go to?
I was down in Cardiff, and I
Okay,
studied quite specifically. I did exploration geology right off the bat,
okay.
and that was through a sort of I'd already sort of decided that I wasn't really interested in oil and gas.
Mm,
Decided I wanted to do geology. Sort of knew there wasn't a great deal of options in terms of geologists back then. Oil and gas, mining, exploration, and decided I didn't want to do oil and gas. Um, and I was fortunate enough a few years before that to go on an expedition to Zimbabwe. That was
okay.
back in '94 through through a charity called the British Schools Exploring Society, which I think is known as the British Exploring Society now. It's still going. I think been going for over 100 years, and they organise expeditions to different countries around the world every year. And I was fortunate enough to go on the Zimbabwean one, and I spent 6 weeks of the summer camping out in the bush, doing sort of flora and fauna projects, general just sort of outdoorsy adventuring stuff, and got a real interest then in sort of exploring and particular Africa. So that sort of kick-started that sort of plan of, well, maybe mineral exploration's a bit more adventurous. It's possible to do in Africa, and I then was fortunate enough to get a bursary through something which is probably closed down now. It's called the Mineral Industries Education Trust to go to university. But the sort of stipulation was I had to go and study either at Cardiff, I think Leicester, Camborne School of Mines, or Imperial London Royal School of Mines, and do an applied geology course, so something like mineral exploration. And that obviously worked in my favour because it's something I wanted to do. And off I went to Cardiff.
That's interesting that you sort of studied exploration geology, as you say, sort of straight off the bat there. But that you think that interest stemmed from that trip to Zimbabwe, and did you see it as a potential career, or was it just something that sort of appealed to you more than studying, rocks to become a teacher, or to understand seismic activity or something?
Yeah, I think it was part of that trip. Sort of reading up then around of what potential career paths you could go on, and that sort of idea of sort of maybe a little bit romantic at the time, but that sort of
Sure.
old sort of explorers out in the middle of nowhere looking for mineral deposits in places people have never been. Uh, it did sound, I'm saying it's a bit bizarre now, but it did sound quite appealing. And then doing the mineral exploration or the exploration geology course at Cardiff sort of gave a much more focused course towards that. And yeah, I thought that at the time would then open up the doors to be able to head back out into Africa and work as a geologist and just travel around.
Must have been quite fun to go to Zimbabwe back then. Anyway, it would have been probably quite different to what it is today, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and a 16, 17-year-old lad from Manchester, had only really done a few holidays around Europe with his family and stuff in the past. It was a great eye opener. And yeah, I just fell in love with Zimbabwe. It was
Okay.
the people, the cultures, the scenery. It was all really really exciting back then, and that sort of set the sowed the seed in terms of this sort of I suppose ongoing love affair with Africa, which
With
is
Africa,
still
yeah.
going some 20
Well, it is a
25 years
lovely.
later.
It is a yeah. I mean, it's a lovely lovely continent. It is a beautiful place in the world. I think if anyone can get a chance to go and experience it, they should, because it is incredible. And you actually you went to study then, didn't you? Your PhD in South Africa.
I did, yes. Though I suppose a slightly circuitous route to get there. It wasn't really on the plan as I was coming to the end of my degree. And actually, initially, I was going to do a master's down at Southampton, but it was going to be a master's by research, and it was on a gold project actually in the DRC. So again, that was the link going back to be able to go back to Africa. Um, and I got offered the position and sort of agreed to it. And the plan was to sort of do the field work on this gold project over the summer after graduating, and then start the next academic year, processing the data and writing up. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which way you look at it, August that year, the Second Congolese War broke out, and that sort of put an end to any of that. Um, so yeah, sort of then I was sort of over that sort of summer holiday with not really quite sure what to do. So,
Mm.
back then all the other, the funding for any other projects had already been allocated. People had already picked up other, students for projects, and all the interviews were closed. So there was nothing really for me, or projects I was interested in to do in the UK then. And the sort of I was then stuck with the potentially of waiting a year before doing a master's. And the reason I suppose I ended up looking at doing or continuing studies, because the year before I graduated we had the Briex scandal, and there was very few jobs for geologists. So
Mm.
yeah, I just I was sort of at I suppose at crossroads, as often happens in our geological careers. There's lots of sort of sliding door moments. um, and yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to do. I could. There was very few jobs. Couldn't find an actual job working as a geologist overseas. That masters had fallen through. And someone mentioned just out of the blue, well, have you ever looked at looking at universities in the southern hemisphere, because their academic year starts at the in sort of January, February. So
Mm.
they're currently looking for position, for students to take up projects. And yeah,
Okay.
sort of a long story short, I ended up getting offered to do a project on a gold project in South Africa at a South African university down in Stellenbosch. So that ticked the African box several times over. And yeah, then early '99, I got a one-way ticket to Cape Town and packed my bags, and off I
Mm.
went.
Mm.
It's great. I can see you've spent a lot of your career focused on like working with companies that focus on Africa. Did you get a chance to return to Manchester, or have you spent a lot of your career in country in Africa?
Yeah, so probably my first 15 years or so, I predominantly spent in Africa. So I would, as most geologists, work on a fly in, fly out type arrangement. But I had my base still in South Africa for those rotations back then. So I had a house, and was sort of essentially living there. So I would only get back to the UK, to visit family, say once a year over Christmas. And you always have plans to visit more often and do other things. And then something else always sort of comes up, or projects, drilling program, takes longer, so you push holidays back, or whatever happens. And I just never managed to get back to the UK that often over that period.
Mm.
But yeah, it was essentially 15 years of living and working in Africa. And then less than sort of 10 years ago now, getting older, I was sort of then in my mid 30s, decided to be based back in the UK, settle down a little bit, be able to be closer to the family. But then I continue to work primarily out in Africa, but being based in the UK.
So you effectively went straight into work from your PhD in Africa and effectively stayed there. I mean, what kind of sort of jobs did you have?
Yeah, so my PhD was very much mapping focused, as well as looking at this gold project. And following that, I suppose I segued into a mapping geologist role. So spent several years
Okay.
mapping and mapping based research in South Africa for the university. Initially, I was doing a postdoctoral fellowship, then for the South African Council for Geoscience, so the equivalent of a geological survey. I was based in one of their regional offices up in the sort of northeast of South Africa. Uh, and yeah, spent several years mapping and doing a little bit of economic geology as well, sort of working a little bit with the Department for uh, Minerals and Energy in South Africa. And sort of following that, then I sort of transitioned, or moved into mineral exploration proper, I suppose you could say, and started working
Okay.
then for junior explorers in various countries and on various commodities.
Okay, and what were you doing for the junior explorers? Was it your mapping, or did you branch out into other areas?
So initially mapping, but then part of the roles became, managing the exploration programs and
Hmm.
looking after the programs and undertaking the work as well. My initial degree was in exploration geology, so I had that background and yeah, much of the work was with juniors, early stage projects, initially in Southern Africa, so Zimbabwe, Zambia, Madagascar, and then I spent several years working in West Africa, particularly Nigeria and Senegal, before moving across into East Africa, and I spent several years living and working in Eritrea. And
Hmm.
then, I sort of progressed through those roles sort of as a, field geologist, project geologist, up to exploration manager, and then more recently progressed doing a bit more consultancy, support roles, sort of as a consultant or, those sorts of positions.
Hmm. And I mean, does anything stand out to you? Any particular projects you worked on stand out? Whether it was because you particularly like the jurisdiction or the lifestyle out there, or whether it was exploration focused, it was a major find you had, or you got a theory right, or indeed it went wrong. Any sort of standout moments from that sort of 15-year African experience?
Yeah, well, it's been. I suppose looking back now, even the tough times weren't so tough really when you with hindsight, and thoroughly enjoyed working in most of those countries. Certain jurisdictions are probably easier to work in than others, and but and that sort of period, I had great exposure to a lot of different commodities and different sort of geological settings and styles. Though I've always sort of focused mostly on gold and base metals, but yeah,
Okay.
and that's not only early stage, but through to resource updates and sort of drill out projects. So that's been very rewarding, and certainly the sort of more recent roles with, for example, Altus Strategies, sort of now the Elemental Altus Royalty Corp. Working with them, they were a sort of prospect generator royalty company with a great portfolio of projects, across Africa, and being involved in all those projects, and seeing some of those projects eventually being joint ventured out or sold on has been enjoyable. But it's always been going out, finding potentially new projects, setting up the teams, developing those, and all the sort of side things to that it comes with. Making new geological friends, seeing new mineral deposits, and being able to advance those projects as far as you can go.
Excellent. Excellent.
I
It's
think
interesting you mentioned. Oh, go on, Dan. Sorry.
I was going to say something we always see in press releases and news coverage. Claims about demand for base metals increasing. That's been going on for a long time now. Is that something you've seen throughout your career? Like, has the demand for these discoveries that you've been looking for been notably increasing?
I think as we know our industry is very very cyclic, and often those cycles, I feel are never quite aligned properly. Where with the time it often takes to identify, discover, and develop a project, those timelines are often completely out of sync with commodity price cycles. But I think over the years, sort of see the demand for metals and the fundamentals of those have been all going in the right direction. And I certainly think that there's the fundamental need for metals, particularly now, obviously, towards the sort of green energy transitions. If half the data that people are reporting is correct, then just the sheer amount of new mines required, or the expansion and increase in production from existing mines is going to be significant, and one hopes this is a great time to be in mineral exploration.
Well, yeah, I mean, one would hope so. I mean,
Yeah.
given your
But I
vast
suppose we have had several cycles, and I think
well,
as the longer you're in the career, the more sort of downturns that you see with this. I suppose I joined on the back of Bre-X with the gold price, at the lowest it had been for a long time, and then a complete, almost a standstill of exploration across the board. And there's been a couple of ups and downs since then, and I'm sure people who've been in the industry longer than I have, you know, longer than the sort of 25 years or so since I graduated, have probably seen a few more. So, but we're by very nature we're quite a positive bunch, I think. Anyway,
yeah.
geologists. So
Well, given you've seen a few cycles, this is always a question I'd like to ask, and it's probably very difficult to answer. I mean, where do you have an opinion on where you see the sector at the moment?
yeah, it's always a tricky one, and it does
Mm,
seem this time that there's a more of a disconnect than in
okay.
previous cycles. We're seeing record gold prices, and certainly now we're seeing that sort of flow through in the market caps of many of the gold producers. But there's limited funding sort of trickling down to explorers still at the moment, and that sort of
Mm,
drip feed has not quite happened. And in previous cycles, it feels like it happened a lot quicker.
okay.
And where now it seems to have been a bit longer. But I certainly don't know the reason why. And yeah, I've yet to find someone who's given me an answer which feels quite right.
Yeah, no, that's so. But you generally feel that in past when the commodity prices have moved up, that's then sort of filtered down into the explorers a bit quicker. Whereas now, yeah, you were seeing these high commodity prices, particularly gold, copper as well, for example. But yeah, there's just not really much interest, let's say, or excitement in the explorers. Maybe it'll just be like the old, maybe like buses. Maybe one day the floodgates will just open and the money will fly in, or maybe we need a bit of a win, or something, another big exploration win, and create some liquidity or money to be made, because mining's definitely not. When you talk to people about investing or putting money away, they don't. People, the last thing I hear is people talking about miners. you it's either Bitcoin, which is of course a tech play, or it's the excitement of another tech play, if you want to call it. It's an automotive company, but it's basically a tech play, in my opinion, of course, Tesla. But again, I don't think people are buying Tesla. I think they're buying Elon Musk, you know. So, and at the minute, some people are buying gold because some people are seeing gold and buying it. And I get this bellwether from when I talk to people at my gun club. It's like what's your average man talking about, and then that's kind of a good bellwether to where the money is sort of heading. But no one ever talks about the miners. So. Yeah, how do we make mining sexy again? I know that's what BHP are working on with their BHP Explore program. They are trying to make it sexy again. But we've spoken
It
about it
is,
quite
and
a
I
few
think that's
times.
been a great, yeah, and it's been a great initiative, I think, by BHP, to start that. And potentially, the majors being more involved in early stage exploration is one of those ways. And certainly in the past, when I first got involved in the industry, back in the 90s, many of the majors had their own exploration departments and were doing significant exploration. That model changed more to allowing juniors to do it, and looking at
Right.
acquiring after they've found something. But certainly being involved more, and is potentially one of the ways to help, really. Um,
Mm,
and I
mm.
think people are going to start to look along those supply chains a bit more, really, isn't it? And we're sort of seeing, as you said, with the tech industry. car producers starting to look at, acquiring, mining assets or feed, from mines, is sort of
Yeah,
opening up other potential avenues for funding. But yeah, I
exactly.
think I think
Mm.
when it does change, it as it often does, probably changes very quickly. And you know, us junior explorers, we need to position ourselves to be ready for when it does, and have the right portfolio in the right jurisdictions to be able to do this.
Well, I think we should definitely talk about that then, how you can position yourself, of course, with your role at Tertiary. I know Dan's done a fair bit of research on the projects. He's good at sort of diving into things, so I will let Dan sort of take this part. But before we get into that, what led to the role of you joining Tertiary, and also let me ask you what your ambition is with the company and your role.
Yeah, so I've known tertiary for quite a few years. Initially, when I moved back to the UK, after, I suppose then it was sort of 15 years of being overseas, sort of starting to try and build up a sort of a network in the industry in the UK, and came across tertiary primarily because they're based up in the northwest, as not far from where I'm based. So that was sort of my initial introduction to them, and sort of followed them. From that period. Back then they were primarily a Scandinavian focused, US focused explorer, but met Patrick Cheatham, several occasions over the years. So um, when they moved into Zambia, sort of probably what 3, 4 years ago now. I did some contract consultancy work for them to look at those projects. I did a trip out for them to sort of assess the projects, and that's sort of where that sort of initial link came. And following that, I was still doing my own consultancy, working with other companies as well. But we kept in touch over the years. And yeah, when they decided they were looking for a new managing director, with someone to come in with sort of new ideas, and with a bit more of an African focused background, it seemed sort of a natural fit in that way.
Absolutely. And before we get into the projects at Tertiary, I thought it'd be good to talk about Zambia. As you noted, that's where the core of the company's assets are. You got a lot of experience working in Zambia, and what's it generally like as an operating jurisdiction?
Yeah, I'm very positive about Zambia as a jurisdiction and a place to work. I first went out to Zambia, I think it was probably 2011. And been back a few times since. Zambia's got a sort of a great mining and exploration industry. Um, and the country as a whole really sort of understands how mining works, and also the importance of mining for the country. So it's and certainly in recent years, the current president is very pro mining, very keen to attract both exploration and mining companies. So it does make it a sort of a favourable jurisdiction to work in. And for me, just in terms of the sort of the peripheral aspects, it's good road network, great sort of internal um, airline service for flying around the country. You know, produces much of its own products. You can get anything you need in country. It's not like working in, I don't know, certain parts of Central Africa or West Africa where you need to import lots of things. There's lots of all the main supermarkets and products that you get in South Africa. All those supermarket chains are based up in Zambia as well. So very very easy place to work, and yeah, been great time spent there so far.
Yeah, so it's got that sort of ideal combination of being a good operating jurisdiction and having the right geology.
It is, yeah. When you think of if you think of copper in Africa, then really the Central African Copper Belt, Zambia, DRC is the place to be. And certainly, there's just changes in legislation, the improvements the government's trying to make to the mining industry. So an updated cadastral system, being able to submit everything, all your company documents, both in terms of uh, mining or exploration related stuff, as well as just general, corporate administrative stuff online. It is, the sort of making those processes easier, and it, makes it an easier jurisdiction to work in. And if things are easier, then, it's you're able to spend more time on exploration and, focus your funds on exploration. And, at the end of the day, that's what we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you get to go out there a lot in your role?
So my plan will be, so Tertiary we have a sort of a strategy at the moment, where we do a campaign style work on our projects. So we don't have a formal office in country and a sort of a in country team full time. So we have some really good local contractors and consultants that we use for those campaign styles. Zambia has a can have a prolonged rainy season where we can't do work. So we use those, and my plan is, once we're coming to the end of the rainy season now and our projects are up and running again, to visit very regularly. Obviously that has to be, balanced with my sort of other duties as the MD, but
Mm.
certainly enjoy spending as much time in the field as I can, and working with the teams on the ground.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Yeah, I imagine it's an amazing place to visit. Just moving on to the projects, I'd like to begin with Concola West. This one really interests me. So you're working with Tertiary's working with Cobalt to identify the down extensions of the shale that supports the Concola and Lumbabe copper mines. And you recently drilled what's thought to be the deepest hole ever drilled in the Zambian copper belt, and you're currently drilling a second hole now. I just wondered, why do you think Cobalt was so keen to partner on the asset?
Yeah, it's a great question. When of all the sort of when you sort of look at, say, like the Concola West project, its location. If you just look at the map, its location's fantastic. It's sort of almost in the shadow of three or four head frames from the various Concola uh, sort of mining operations. But any geologist who spend any time in Zambia will always then raise the caveat, and it's a big one. Is that well, it's next door, but everyone knows these basins dip down to to the south, the southwest, and already at Concola Deeps. It's a deep operating mine, so anything further along is going to be even deeper. So it's sort of always been known as potentially prospective, but the question's always been, well, how deep, and is it potentially too deep? And for junior explorers, then it produces the quandary of, well, how can you go about exploring on one of these sorts of projects then, and certainly doing holes which could be, as we're now finding out, a couple of kilometers deep. That's a difficult sell for a junior explorer. Um, at the time of acquiring the project, I suppose, very fortuitous that Cobalt had just finished the work on Labamba, um, and we're had some great success there, and we're looking at potentially new assets in nearby. And they had the sort of the vision and the desire to test that and see if potentially they could pick up the continuations, and sort of from their internal modeling, um, they thought that there was a chance worth taking, and that's sort of where it started from. And yeah, it's been a fantastic project to be involved with, and to see the way they approach exploration. It's been great so far.
Excellent. And how is that second hole going? Is that still underway at the moment?
It's still underway, yes. So it's expected to be not as deep. So the first hole was 2,711 meters. Um, all that, and I think, part of that exploration approach is, they're, it's a data-driven exploration. That's sort of where I feel the sort of AI, part comes in. It's to help, process, interpret the data to support the geological teams. And the data from the first hole, while for us, we didn't hit the ore shale. The hole had to be stopped before that. They had several sort of technical difficulties in the prior weeks, and it was decided, best to stop drilling, pull the rods out, and be able to start, a new hole, and potentially, get the rods stuck down the hole, and then not be able to drill further. The data collected and the data they continue to produce from that hole is, not only supporting the exploration on our license, and, that went into, targeting, for the second hole, but supporting their understanding of the wider basin and potential, where there could be, further interest, in the future. So a really interesting approach to exploration. So the second hole's underway, and hopefully in the next couple of months we'll be, you know, uh, close to finishing, depending on exactly when, or if the mineralized zones hit, and then we'll be looking at the assays on the back of that.
Excellent. So yeah, it's just to kind of wait and see what the data tells you about this area for now.
It is. I suppose I suppose it's a slightly unusual for a junior explorer in that, the typical thing is, you're gonna, for junior explorers, and, particularly for investors, you're drilling a program. you know Holes are, normally, 100, 200 meters or so. They're finished in a matter of weeks. We send assays on off, or send samples off for assaying on a regular basis to the lab. So you have this, as the drilling's continuing, you're getting a sort of feedback of the assay results, and then there's, regular updates on those drilling programs. This is it's a much bigger picture, longer term, exploration play in that respect. These holes take, months to drill.
Mm.
They're really technical holes. The drilling team's really skilled. They're using downhole directional drill bits. They're wedging off the holes. There's lots of different aspects they're looking at. And then only, once the hole is done, assays are being sent off as it goes. But it's a much longer term play, and it's sort of a different way of doing things. But if it's successful, this could be, or it would be a significant
Mm.
catalyst for tertiary. It's a complete game changer for us, really.
Would it be, to use a market term, fill or kill? So is it as binary as that, or I think as always with geology, it's sort of there's more nuance than that. But I mean, if it is, will it be obvious that it's too deep, and it's like, okay, well that's it, then we've sort of established that.
That's a potential option. What happens, and certainly that any mining at those sorts of depths has its challenges, but there are, mines, much deeper than that in other jurisdictions. The gold mines in the Wits and stuff in South Africa, are very deep as well. But it's gonna be, yeah, a function of whether it would be economical at those sorts of depths. So it's going to be a function of grade and widths, as well as, is it economical now, or maybe in the future, or maybe never, isn't it?
Mm.
But as you say, yeah, probably a little bit, more nuanced than yes or no. But
Right.
still, for a junior like, tertiary, it's a great project to be involved in, and we've got a great partner who's fully funding that approach, and certainly something we'd never be able to do on our own. I think going to the markets and saying, hey, look, we want to drill, a couple of kilometre deep holes and test this. Going to cost us, a couple of million per hole or something. Can we raise the money for it? It would have been a difficult sell on our own. So luckily we've got a great partner who's willing to do that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So another project where you're partnering with the holder of a neighbouring asset is Mackay, of course, where you're working with First Quantum. Could you tell us a little bit more about this partnership? I saw recently drilling highlighted some near-surface anomalous copper and nickel, so I imagine that's got quite an exciting next few months.
Yeah, so we're in sort of discussions of the next steps as we come out the rainy season. There was only a little bit of limited drilling done last year, and that was purely just a timing aspect. Once the agreement had been signed, is in place, and all the requirements to be able to drill were there. There was only a small window of opportunity to drill before the rainy season. But it's a great location for a project. We've got it's a great portfolio in general, but Mackay, it's within 20 kilometers of First Quantum's mines there. Both the Enterprise nickel and the Sentinel mine as well. And on the other side, that's to the east, and then to the west, we've got Arc Minerals and Anglo. Where Anglo have got the option of spending up to 80 odd million US to earn into that project. So it's an interesting area, that sort of domes area, and we're interested to see how things develop.
Yeah, it's certainly the neighbourhood to be in, isn't it? I know the RNS said so far you've only investigated a very small portion of the project's potential. So there must be a lot of work that you could potentially do here moving forward, depending obviously on what the results tell you.
Yeah, so for us, we've essentially, Tertiary's sort of thought process on this is, we've only got one hole really into that western end of into the basin. So there's a lot more to look at. We know the license area. There's some regional work done as well, historically, and there's a few other targets identified, or geochemistry targets related to some of these cross-cutting faults in the basin as well. So there's a few things we'd be keen to look at, and certainly for First Quantum, doing exploration, I suppose, or within, potential, trucking distance, or of their operating mines, make sense for them, and that's why they were interested in our Mackay license, in the first place, and they're sort of interested. They hold the sort of eastern end of that basin as well, where they've done quite a bit of drilling last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that project could develop. In terms of what would be the next steps in exploration there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like an obvious opportunity for First Quantum, so I imagine they're keen to keep pushing forward. And the other asset in Zambia I wanted to ask you about was Mishima North. So drilling this year has been returning some encouraging silver intersections, which was quite a new development. So is silver the primary target at the project now, or is it more complementary to what you were originally searching for?
I think probably the latter, in terms of more complementary, and Mishima North is sort of our priority target for Tertiary this year. The license, historically was considered to be prospective primarily for IOCG, so these iron oxide copper gold, and it contains several targets sort of delineated by BHP Billiton, sort of back in the 2010s. But also contained, a series of sort of copper in soil anomalies, which was also sort of drew us to the license. And it was sort of on the back of one of these that was drilled was we identified the silver as well, and that silver only came out from actually a sort of an internal sort of quality control process. So as many of the exploration companies, we analyze our samples using one of these portable XRF devices, which is very good for copper, but is limited in terms of other elements. And we sent some samples off to be tested at the lab just to confirm the grades, and saw these anomalous elevated silver results. And then we looked at submitting the entire holes then to the lab for analysis. Unfortunately, with the PXRF device that we had, we weren't able to get reliable or useful silver results from it, and that's where the silver values came out. So it was in a way a surprise, but we're only 20 kilometers away from Kalengwa, which is a historic mine currently being brought back into operation by Mexico Resources. And Kalengwa's sort of claim to fame is it was the highest grade copper occurrence in Zambia. Um, I think they were sort of direct shipping or up to other operations to blend the feed. There's talks of grades up to 26% copper, but it also contained elevated silver as well in the ranges of 20 to 80 grams a ton. So it's sort of opened up a new modular exploration style on that license. So not just sort of IOCG type, not just say maybe more traditional sedimentary copper, but looking at these sort of polymetallic copper, zinc, silver, and potentially could be importantly these sorts of or these style of sort of polymetallic epigenic replacement style deposits can be often higher in some of these sort of critical metals as well, germanium, gallium, bismuth, and so on. So it's sort of opened up a new avenue of interest for us. And we're sort of really excited to get back on the ground there and do some additional drilling. And we'll be hoping for some really positive results on this license going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always good, it's always good to add another metal to the exploration portfolio for diversification purposes, isn't it? Is silver something you've got a lot of experience exploring for? Is it a metal you like the look of?
Well, I like the look of it. It's nice and shiny, but it's something that's with in previous exploration, previous projects worked on has not been the main focus, but it's been one of those sort of accessory metals often associated with it. So I spend quite a bit of time working in base metal projects, particularly volcanogenic massive sulfides. And often associated with the sort of copper, lead, zinc is silver as well. But yeah, I think it adds a sort of an interesting story to us. Again, it provides a little bit of diversification, um, and yeah, it's an interesting one going forward, I think.
Okay. Well, that covers all of Africa, doesn't it? I think for what your what's close to your heart with your previous experience done there. But Nevada is, of course, part of Tertiary's portfolio as well. So, I mean, what can we talk about with Nevada here and some of the projects that you've got over there?
Yeah, so well, I suppose we do have a couple of other projects in Zambia, both Jackson, Mapala. It's ongoing as well. But in Nevada, and I suppose this is not quite sort of legacy projects in a way, but in a almost an early incarnation of the company, there was a focus on Nevada and gold and silver, and we still,
Okay.
we retain some projects there, in particular Brunton Pass, where there was work done last year. So it remains an interest for the company. Um, you know, operating in the US is different to operating in Africa, in that within, say, Africa, we have, sometimes, minimum spend requirements in terms on projects. Certain deadlines have to be met in terms of progress on those projects. And certainly say, in Zambia, after the initial 3 years of your license, you have to drop a percentage of that license. So, it keeps the momentum going on the project. That's not the case in the US. And while we've done, been sort of advancing Brunton Pass, those time requirements are not there as much compared to our Zambian projects. Um, but it's a really interesting project. The drilling was quite limited last year. We sort of understand, in terms of the targeting now, there would need to be deeper holes to intersect the sort of target units from the geophysics that we're looking at. Um, and that's something we're sort of weighing up, the best way to sort of be able to advance that project now, and to realize some value from it. And certainly one of the sort of wider strategies we're looking at is bringing in potential joint venture partners to fund in and earn into those projects to advance them. We've had great success over the last couple of years with our current joint ventures. It's a good model for us. Particularly as a junior with a small market cap, and we are able to only do limited exploration in terms with our funds. And we understand that we do have quite a large portfolio, and it's difficult to do justice to all those licenses with that limited part. And what we don't want to do is spread ourselves too thin, and not advance projects, in a manner that we would like. So certainly for us at the moment, the focus is Zambia, but the Nevada assets are still there,
Okay.
and represent a really interesting jurisdiction to work. Nevada's world renowned as a gold silver location. And we're looking at those next steps for Brunton Pass now, and to see how we can push that project forward.
Excellent. Okay, so it's fair to say that the focus is on the Zambia projects. I mean, where would you like to see the company? Well, let's say the end of the year, and if you set the position, what would you like to have seen achieved, or perhaps new knowledge acquired?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think with our current portfolio, and I think we've got two great joint ventures. So we're hoping to see some real positive results coming out from one or more from those. We
Mm.
understand exploration success. Yeah, not every project's gonna be a winner in that respect. But we're really excited about those projects. And we're for Mishima North as well, we are hoping to advance it through drilling. So in terms, by the end of the year, it would be great to see the advancements of those three core projects. Ideally, we'll identify an additional joint venture partner to help advance at least another one of our projects.
Mm.
We're really keen to see these projects advance now, and to realize value for the company. So certainly, for us, drilling on Mishima North, continue drilling by Cobalt. There could be a major catalyst as well, and potentially bringing in further joint ventures on some of our other licenses. Um, as well as we're still sort of in the process of looking for new projects as part of that sort of prospect generator style pipeline. Um,
Okay.
and that has the potential. When we take all that together, several, there's potential for several milestones, coming out throughout this year. So hopefully they'll be accretive, and Tertiary will be in a much better position in terms of its share price and market cap at the end of the year than it was at the beginning.
Okay, excellent. Well, Dan, do you have any final thoughts or questions for Richard?
Yeah, just one question, Richard. In the RNS for your appointment, I noted that it said you'd recently completed an MSc in finance from Leicester University. It stuck out to me. Is that something a lot of geologists do? Or is it something you chose to do to sort of expand your skill set and improve the work you do?
Yeah, so interesting question. Yeah, so that was, I think, back in 2016 now. But I sort of got in a little bit more interested in the sort of investment or the financial side of projects, and I suppose ultimately, success in mineral exploration. So for geologists is, ultimately it's finding economically viable mineral resource, and there's a lot of aspects of making it economical, and one of those aspects is the finances. But the initial interest sort of came, working for a fund and reviewing projects, and it, part of that reviewing projects was, there was a team of, geologists that I was part of, looking at the technical aspects, and then there was the sort of the finance guys on the other side, and it just sort of grew from that sort of interest in being able to understand a little bit more about what they were talking about, and the sort of typical finance speak that they had, and it sort of grew from there. I decided to study the degree in finance, and I just thought it'll be useful in the long term, to understand that side of things more, and clearly now, as in a role as an MD of a company, it's sort of paying back in dividends to have that grounding.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, the economics are extremely important when it comes to looking at whether to advance a project or not, aren't they?
That's it, yeah, and I suppose that's where we go from sort of technical successes to actual, true successes, and it's those the projects have to stack up. So yeah, it's certainly an important part of doing the jobs we do.
It's really interesting.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. We're nearly up on an hour, so that's a good introduction to, of course, yourself, Richard, and and indeed what you want to achieve at Tertiary, and a bit about the project as well. So thank you very much for all your time today, and I'm sure we'll be catching up on a StockBox interview in the not too distant future. But yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Richard.
No, it's been great chatting. Yeah, thanks to be on.